All right, Ron, these are my favorite type of segments because I'm always fascinated with the buying process on how someone invests their life savings into a business they have little to no control over. So let's put that's the table stakes. Like you did something amazing. But before you get to buying a franchise, how do you get there? What was your story? What even brought you into franchising?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As I looked at Pool Scouts, the journey to get to Pool Scouts is I'm a Army vet. I was served 24 years, and as I retired, one of the things that I thought about was what do I want to do next? And naturally, where in the military, where I was looking at what's the next big thing that we want to accomplish in our thing of accomplishments. And so as I looked at it, I started working with my wife on starting her business, her photography business. And what I found that it was extremely daunting. It took a lot of time. We made mistakes. And the one thing I did take out of it is I didn't want to do that whole process alone again. So that kind of led me into franchising. So I looked up franchising. I went to IBMF, which is the Institute for Military Veterans and Families. I'm sponsored at Syracuse. And as we worked through that process, I started to learn more about how to become a CEO. And then we talked a little bit about franchising. And we had some good conversation. So as I worked through it, I was connected with Fran Choice. And so Stephen Maker talked to me and we had some good conversations. I filled out some questionnaires. And as I worked through it, he gave me a few options and I looked at them all. And at the end, Pool Scout seemed like the brand for me. So I just kind of started the discovery journey on that. Talked to Dave Warren, which is the Buzz franchise lead for acquiring new talent. And so as we went through that, it was kind of hands off from there. We worked through the process. Seemed to be pretty easy. And the culture fit. So I talked to the CEO, talked to Buzz Franchise Brand CEO and COO. The COO was Brian. He's a military veteran, so it kind of clicked in with me. Kevin's a phenomenal guy. So as I talked to Kevin in our initial call, I could just see his mind tweaking on the strategy, other thoughts, all the way through the process, and I could see that I'm probably in good hands with a good franchisee. And then as I taught our franchise brand model, and then as I talked to Michael Wagner, last but not least, that kind of sealed the deal for me that it's a good family. I can move forward with that thought process. So I was pretty happy about that. And that's what led me to Pool Scouts.
Love it.
In the meantime, as I was doing discovery, I was driving around my community, kind of looking at my competitors, and I started to see pools in everybody's backyards that I never knew existed before. So all of a sudden, like everything else, you buy a new car, you start to see the same car everywhere. Same thing with pools. I started kind of viewing backyards, and there was pools everywhere. So I was like, there's tons of opportunity. And then everything that I had been reading prior to Pool Scouts is people had a hard time with finding a reliable, professional pool technician that they can count on as a company. So that's what led me down this road.
All right. Great story. Great opening line. Lots to unpack. First, thank you for your service. On the military front, like today, you're going to have challenges in business. Are you able to like go back in your life and recognize moments or things that the military taught you that gives you scaffolding for how to deal with being a business owner? Like your backdrop, do you access that in your everyday life?
I do. I actually access it quite often. I mean, one thing the Army has taught me is to live by the Army values. And one of their main was is integrity and having honor and courage. So I list it's 7 values, but those 3 stand out to me. 1, integrity, always do what's right by people. So they trust you, they believe in you, and they know what you say you're going to do. As we look into courage, have the courage to do the right thing always, no matter if somebody's looking or they're not looking. I always say have the courage, 1, to step out on your own and do something greater than yourself, but also do something that's impacting someone else or the community. And so I kind of take those things forward as I look at it. And then my last one that I look at is just being the best you can be every day and just challenging yourself to step out the box to do something greater than somebody else does. And so I take those things forward when I'm dealing with people like my employees. I take it forward when we're dealing with strategy and how to scale and how to move. I also take that forward with just dealing with everyday life. If something happens and it's an impact, naturally things happen on the battlefield that gave me a great impact and that automatically made me think in quick mode or super vigilance mode. And so as I look at that, if something happens, I'm quick not to panic. I say, hey, let's just sit back for 2 seconds, think about it, and then figure out a plan for it, and then just execute the plan. So every time I do that, it just all reflects back to my military background.
If you think back to the buying process, so you go through franchise, they connect you with a consultant. The consultant takes your personality test. They look through their inventory brands that they get commissioned on, and they say, here are the brands, and they give you these brands. And I imagine there were a few of them. There were other ones than Pool Scots that get presented to you. If you go through think back to when you're doing your due diligence on these businesses, if that call with Kevin, which I think Kevin Wilson is a phenomenal human being, if the call with Kevin or Michael or whoever, if it doesn't feel as good as it did, do you walk away from the business opportunity? Did the people end up being the swing vote for you?
Yeah, the people were most definitely the swing vote. I could see. I had done some research with a few other companies, 3 other companies actually, and some of the things that they did was, it stood out to me as maybe it's a red flag or my gut just didn't feel right. But when I walked into Buzz and talked to Kevin Wilson on the first meeting that we had, I felt really comfortable. I felt like he took care of family. And then we had some good conversations about how they dealt with people during COVID. And that was one of the selling points that I really liked about Buzz is they took care of families during COVID, and some of the people that weren't producing that strongly, they gave them some breaks on a few things to help them stay in business. And so that to me, it just says, 1, you care about people, and 2, you're here to support them throughout the journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a few sides to this. One is we've talked with franchisees. They say there's only 2 things that push them over the edge to buy, and variations, but it's culture and it's the business model. And so you talked about I'm looking at my community. I can see how many pools are here. I know that there's a gap in the service side. I know I can solve it with my human background, the integrity that I'm going to cross apply to this. But along that way, if Kevin's like, during COVID, we doubled our royalty, then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I'm this is not the right fit for me. And so then you get to the business model, and you went through discovery and looking at it. And the last thing that I think is super valuable, and this is my question. My question is, why did you ultimately do this? But every franchisee says something to do with family, whether it's more time with their spouse, whether it's more time with their kids, whether it's leaving a legacy. But why did you do this?
It's kind of funny how the story started. My wife has said when I retired that I got to stop playing golf and spending money every day to go play golf. So that's kind of our inside running joke that, no matter what, me playing golf on a day on the course is great, but it's not bringing any money in. So, what drove me is the models that I started to look at were more customer service friendly. And I like being out talking to people. It helps me to do things I've sat behind a desk and done management and strategy for years. So ultimately, I can get out and talk to people in Pool Scouts. I can see people. I'm not spending money on golf except when I want to, but it's not very often. So kind of minimize that whole concept there. And then we move forward into I can just be outside and be free. And I'm not tied to desk like I have been for the last 24 years. I can just step outside. If I want to go run in the trucks with technicians all day, I can. If I want to go to community service with folks and encouraging the brand, I can. If I want to give back to the community, I can do that also. So it just gives me a lot of flexibility to do some stuff that, 1, I like to be outside. I like to work. I like to tinker with stuff and do stuff. And then I also like to learn stuff new. And so Pool Scouts gave me all those opportunities to do those things. And so that's why it was a good fit for me. And ultimately, it gives me my family time back. And so I've been gone from my family for years. We've done multiple duty assignments, and I owe my wife some time back, because naturally she's the backbone of my family. And so she kind of keeps us kind of in line, I guess you would call it, military in line, doing the things that we need to do. And so this gave me the opportunity to kind of give back to her and be around, but still do something effective that I would like for the community and for myself.
Great answer. So and this is going to be a loaded question, but I'm curious, like in business particularly, are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hungry? Like what emotion do you have in business?
In business, I'm pretty competitive naturally anyway, and so in business, I find that opportunity to be hungry for the next challenge. And so as I stepped in the buzz, one thing that I found is that I have a lot of people around me that's pretty competitive, so they're doing great things. And as a matter of fact, you mentioned competitive. Recently at our conference, since you mentioned you've been to one of our conferences, I won rookie franchise of the year just actually I guess 2 weeks ago. So I was recognized for all of that. So that was pretty good accomplishment for me to say, one, I'm doing the right things. My business coach Kirsten is pushing me to do greater things. We're following the model, and then we're just kind of getting after it as a whole. Michael's pushing me along the way to kind of explore some new things in the community, plus explore things that we can do as a franchise. So the sky's the limit. I'm hungry. I love it. I love coming to work every day, and I love working with my team. My team's phenomenal. We're doing some great things, and I expect us to hit some more milestones ahead of schedule as we keep pushing forward. So my milestone for me, my personal goal, is to reach a million by the third or fourth year, and so we're kind of on track to do that. And I think that we'll reach it just with the team and the work we're doing right now, setting the stage.
On that last answer, hitting a million. If you think about like going back to the sales process in franchising, they use the item 19 as a way to disclose average unit volume. And I've always looked at that, and my mind is blown when a franchise buyer prospect goes, well, what's the average? And it says the number. And they're like, well, what's the worst? I'm like, well, shouldn't you be coming into this saying, how do I be the best? Like, don't you want to be number one in the system? And so it sounds like whatever numbers you saw in the process, you're like, cool, that's great, that's a baseline. I'm going further than that.
Definitely. And I did look at it as a gauge. I said, well, if all things tank and I don't do well, this is the least I'll make. And then naturally I talked to some franchisees as I worked into my discovery process, said, hey, kind of what are you making in the middle? What's the average? And so I kind of got a baseline of what the average looks like. And I was satisfied with the average, but naturally I'm hungry to do more. So I was like, okay, had to go back to my wife and say, yep, I might be playing golf sooner than you think if I do these goals here. And so she kind of had an instant that all right, we'll see how it goes. And it gave her a comfort too that, hey, we're buying into a good family system with a good model. And then we have some achievable goals and milestones that we can touch.
You go through a discovery period. You now have the agreement. The last thing left to do is sign it. Were you scared at all? Were there any moment where you're like, oh, should I do this? Or were you guns blazing? Were you like, I'm going forward?
It was a little bit of both. I had a surreal moment that, one, I've gotten to the finish line. It's a good model, good family atmosphere. I feel comfortable jumping in. Two is as we look at the FDD and look at all the things that are required, I've looked at my 401k and said, oh my God, I'm about to pull out a part of my retirement, which is the whole reason retiring from the military. And so it was a scary moment, but it was surreal, and it made me decide, yep, we're all in. Let's go and see what it's gonna do.
If you think back on your decision, is any part of you wish you would have done it sooner in your career? Like now that you're in it, now that you know what you know, do you wish you looked at franchising earlier?
I wish that many a days from retirement and helping my wife with our first business, I would have looked at franchising. It was a whole lot more simple. I had people in the background doing work, just to help us get over the hurdles. And then you don't really make it. You make mistakes, but there are things that you can quickly rebound from. Some of the stuff that we did before was in paperwork and other things, and it was a little hard to knock those things out. So I feel really comfortable being in a franchise model, and it's proved to be very great. So I can concentrate on doing the work, achieving goals, and making money. And so everything else in the background, I can get it done, but they're going to tell me, yep, you're getting to this point, you need to do this, or you need to do that. And so they would guide me through that process. So that part I really love. I've loved about being in a franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it amazes me how big franchising is, yet how little the education is. Like I can think back to my first day going into franchising, I had no idea the depth of this, and I would imagine you're the same. You're going through some business coaching or classes to figure this out. You're being introduced to franchising, but it's not a part of the way that our education system works. Yet it's such a big and impactful thing that you said, like, look, the model allowed me to sidestep some of the mistakes that I would make, and you turn around and you're like, all right, there's other people going through exactly what I'm doing as a part of a team that I own. And so, I find it fascinating that franchising as a whole hasn't been educated, because if that was part of our education system or the way that business school worked or whatever, then I think more people would probably jump into it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And it's been great to have, having other franchisees in 17 states to be able to call, and I can call Michael Wagner on the instant on speed phone and say, hey, I'm in a bind. Can you help me? And they're calling all other distributors and other folks to get you through it. And nothing's like that very first time when you have an incident that's so big that you're like, I don't know what just happened, but I need some help. And I don't have to twiddle my thumbs and think in my own mind. I can go out and automatically make some calls, and then people are making calls on my behalf all around. So that's been really great. And considering Pool Scouts, on average, we service about 13,000 customers. 13,000 pools this last year. And so I always have a friend to call, phone a friend anywhere to say, yep, hey, I'm having this problem. What are you having? Are you using these chemicals? I'm using these chemicals. And we can compare notes, and I can quickly make decisions that work in favor of my bottom line, but also work and to help us keep growing.
Ron, your story is fantastic. Do you think you ever buy another franchise brand? Do you diversify your portfolio and get into another business someday?
Yeah, well, so me and my wife had thought about that, and it's something that's pushed us is we see now that it's doable. It's a model. It follows the FDD is pretty accurate. And so we have been thinking about doing something else in the future as we continue to grow. Maybe it's something we can add to the portfolio.
Yeah, I love it. Ultimately, if I'm advising you, the easiest way to scale in franchising is look at all the relationships, everything that you said in the beginning, then the integrity, the community, the building, talking to people, all that built up an asset that's your ownership, that's your brand. That if you ever do it, you go to 1 degree separated of how else can you help all these people that you've already helped with pool service? What's the next thing that you can, or what's the next problem that you can solve for them? That seems like a easy way to continue to scale. So let's close on this. Any advice for someone that's out there in the world thinking about franchising? What would you say to them about whether they should consider it or not?
I believe that if you're an entrepreneur, you have the entrepreneur spirit. I think a person should go out and call a franchise coach or one of those folks, and they'll help direct you. When I was looking at franchises by myself, it was overwhelming. It was, naturally, there's a ton of businesses out there that I didn't even know existed, even had a thought of. So getting with an entrepreneur coach is definitely first and foremost. Look at the NPS scores of the businesses that you're looking at, because that's important too, because that drives culture. And also it tells you something about the company. Last but not least, I would just say, what's the gap in your community that you can take that on and close that gap? And so for me, Pool Scouts has been that gap where I'm averaging touching 32 pools. 32 pools for 6 months every week, me personally. And then I have the team doing the same thing. So you're learning people, you're growing people, you're talking to people. It's all of that's important. As you do your research, just do your due diligence to look deep inside the model to make sure it fits for you. Because at the end, it's about the culture that you're walking into, and naturally, it's just like buying a car. Once you buy it, you're married to it. It's over. So you just got to pick something that works for you. And so that's what I would always pass to any franchisee.
Ron, love your story, love your advice, love the direction, love the hustle and grit, love your approach to this. I'll be cheering for you, and I look forward to hearing how your story goes. Thanks for sharing some of this with us too.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
For Ron, I'm Nick. This is another episode of Meet the Z.